All right, so today we're going down the Reddit rabbit hole. You know those threads where people are talking about what subtle behaviors they think reveal someone's true personality?
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a whole stack of comments and anecdotes and opinions to unpack.
I love it. It's like we're going to be amateur detectives for the day.
Exactly.
This will be fun.
So, I mean, I got to say, some of these comments were so spot on. Like, I was reading them, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so true.
Yeah.
But then others, I was like, I don't know if I'm totally buying that.
Yeah.
That's where you come in, because we're going to try to figure out, why these behaviors resonate with people. What does psychology say? And, maybe even learn a thing or two about ourselves along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't judge someone solely on a few actions, but these observations can offer valuable insights, especially when we consider the bigger picture.
For sure, for sure. Okay, let's start with a behavior that seemed to trigger a lot of people on Reddit.
Okay.
Avoiding accountability. The blame shifters, the excuse makers, the folks who just can't seem to own up to their mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Like one user shared a story about setting a boundary with their mom and getting completely shut down
Oh, wow.
because of it. And it just sounds like classic narcissistic behavior.
It's interesting you bring up narcissism. That inability to accept responsibility is often a hallmark of that personality type. And, it's something that people find incredibly frustrating because it undermines trust and it creates an imbalance in relationships. When someone consistently refuses to acknowledge their role in a situation,
Right.
it can feel like they're not really engaging in a genuine two-way relationship.
Totally. It's like they're always trying to protect their ego,
Yeah.
even if it means hurting others in the process.
Exactly. And that's why it triggers such a strong reaction. It feels fundamentally unfair and disrespectful.
For sure. But then what about those little white lies? Some Reddit users argue that not all lies are bad, especially if they're meant to protect someone's feelings. So how do we reconcile that with this idea of honesty and accountability?
Well, I think in that case, it's all about intent. A manipulative lie designed to deceive or control is vastly different from a white lie told with empathy and good intentions. Think about it this way. If the lie is ultimately meant to benefit the other person, to spare them unnecessary pain or discomfort,
Yeah.
it might be justifiable. But if it's primarily serving the liar's own interests, that's where the red flags start waving.
Okay, I'm starting to see the nuances here. It's not always black and white.
Yeah, it's not. And context matters, too. A lie told in a high-stakes situation, like to protect someone from danger, carries different weight than a lie about, say, forgetting to take out the trash.
Right, for sure. Okay, moving on to another hot topic from Reddit. How someone talks about others.
Okay.
There were tons of comments about this, specifically about people who badmouth absent friends or treat service staff poorly.
Yeah, this is fascinating because it taps into our sense of empathy and social intelligence. We instinctively pay attention to how people treat those around them, especially those they perceive as having less power. It gives us clues about their character and values.
It's like that saying, you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them.
Exactly. And psychologically, this behavior can reveal a lot. Someone who constantly puts others down might be struggling with their own insecurities. They might be trying to elevate themselves by diminishing others. Or it could signal a lack of empathy and compassion, a disconnect from the feelings and experiences of those around them.
Right. But then there's that whole debate about whether this behavior is foolproof. Some Reddit users were arguing that even narcissists can be incredibly charming in public.
Right?
So how much weight should we really give to how someone talks about others?
That's a great question, and it's a valid point. We can't rely solely on one isolated behavior. It's about looking for patterns. If someone consistently displays a lack of respect or consideration for others across different situations and relationships, that's a much stronger indicator than a single instance of gossip or rudeness.
So we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions based on one interaction. It's more about the overall pattern of behavior.
Precisely. We're looking for that consistency to get a more accurate read on someone's true character.
Okay, consistency is key. Got it. Speaking of patterns, another recurring theme on Reddit was about how someone treats those they perceive as beneath them. Waitstaff, the elderly, anyone they might see as less powerful or deserving of respect.
Yeah. This goes beyond just basic manners. It speaks to someone's core values and how they navigate power dynamics. Do they see themselves as inherently superior to others? Do they exploit their position of power? Or do they treat everyone with equal dignity and respect regardless of their social standing?
One Reddit user who worked in education talked about being extra mindful of how they spoke to kids, acknowledging that power imbalance. I thought that was really insightful.
Absolutely. That awareness is key. It's about recognizing that even subtle differences in power can impact our interactions. And it makes you wonder, are some people more likely to abuse that power when they think they can get away with it?
That's a good question. Which leads us to that concept of moral licensing. I know you mentioned this earlier, but can you explain that a bit more? It sounds like it's directly related to this idea of power dynamics.
Sure. So moral licensing is this psychological phenomenon where people feel like they've earned the right to behave badly after doing something good.
Hmm.
It's like they've built up this reserve of good deeds, and now they can afford to splurge on a little bit of bad behavior.
So it's like thinking, well, I volunteered at the soup kitchen last week, so it's okay if I'm rude to the cashier today.
Exactly. It's a fascinating and somewhat disturbing aspect of human psychology, and it can definitely play a role in how people treat those they perceive as beneath them. They might think, I'm generally a good person, so I can afford to be a little dismissive or disrespectful in this particular situation.
That's kind of scary to think about. But it makes sense. Like, they're giving themselves permission to act out because they believe their overall goodness will balance it out.
Right. And that's why it's so important to be aware of this tendency in ourselves and others. We need to hold ourselves accountable for our actions, regardless of our past behavior or perceived moral standing.
Yeah, for sure. This has been so insightful already. I'm realizing how much I unconsciously observe and analyze these behaviors in others. It's like I've been doing armchair psychology without even realizing it.
We all do it to some extent. It's part of being human. We're constantly trying to make sense of the world around us, and that includes understanding the people we interact with.
But this deep dive is taking it to a whole new level. And there's still so much more to discuss.
Absolutely. We've just scratched the surface of this fascinating topic.
It's funny, before this deep dive, I never really considered how much our online behavior might reveal about our true personalities. But after reading through that Reddit thread, I'm starting to see things a little differently.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area to explore. The anonymity of the internet often emboldens people to say and do things that they wouldn't dream of in face-to-face interactions.
Right, like one user even claimed that. Online anonymity is the ultimate test of character. Do you think there's any truth to that?
There's definitely something to be said for that disinhibition effect online. When people feel less accountable for their actions, they're more likely to express their true thoughts and feelings, even if those thoughts and feelings are less than flattering. But it's not as simple as saying that our online selves are our true selves.
Oh, so it's more nuanced than that.
Definitely. Our online behavior is still influenced by social norms and expectations. Even if those norms are different from the offline world, we might curate our online personas, presenting a carefully crafted image that aligns with how we want to be perceived.
It's like we're all performing to some extent, both online and offline.
Exactly. But the key difference is that online, we have more control over the performance. We can edit our posts, delete comments, and carefully construct an image that might not reflect our everyday reality.
Right, and this reminds me of another point that kept popping up on Reddit. The difference between how people act in public versus private, especially those in positions of power.
Ah, yes, the classic Jekyll and Hyde scenario. We've all encountered people who are charming and charismatic in public, but then turn cold or abusive behind closed doors. It's a particularly disturbing pattern because it can be so difficult to detect.
Totally. And one Reddit user shared a story about their father, who was always the life of the party. But privately, he was emotionally manipulative and controlling. And it took years for them to recognize that discrepancy between his public persona and his true nature.
That's a heartbreaking example of how someone can use impression management to mask their true intentions. They're essentially playing a role, carefully crafting an image that's designed to elicit a specific response from others.
So how can we discern between genuine kindness and this calculated performance? It feels like such a slippery slope.
It's all about looking for that consistency again. Do their words and actions align across different situations and relationships? Do they treat everyone with the same level of respect? Regardless of their social status or perceived usefulness, those are key indicators of genuine character.
Okay, so consistency, got it. But, sometimes even good people have bad days. We can't expect perfect behavior all the time, right?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing patterns, not judging someone based on a single interaction. We all make mistakes. We all have moments where we're not at our best. But if someone consistently exhibits a lack of empathy, respect, or accountability, that's a much bigger red flag.
It's like we need to give people the benefit of the doubt. but also be mindful of those recurring patterns that might reveal something deeper about their character.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And this leads us to another important aspect of this discussion: honesty.
You mean beyond just telling the truth?
Right. You know, the Reddit thread was full of comments about people who constantly exaggerate, embellish stories, or try to present a version of themselves that isn't quite real. It's a form of dishonesty that erodes trust and undermines authenticity.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm instantly turned off when I sense that someone is trying too hard to impress or be someone they're not.
Yeah, authenticity is crucial in any relationship, whether it's personal or professional. When someone feels like they can't be genuine around you, it creates a distance and prevents true connection.
So what about those people who are always striving to be the perfect friend or partner or colleague? Is that necessarily a bad thing?
I think it depends on their motivation. Are they genuinely kind and caring? Or are they driven by a need for external validation? It's a subtle distinction, but an important one.
So we should be wary of people who seem too eager to please or constantly seek approval from others.
I think it's worth paying attention to, especially if it's coupled with other behaviors that suggest insecurity or a lack of genuineness. You know, are they able to be vulnerable? Do they show their flaws? Or are they always hiding behind a facade?
Okay, all this talk about facades and hidden motives is making my head spin a little. I need to bring it back down to earth with some concrete examples. What other specific behaviors stood out to you from the Reddit thread?
Well, one that I found particularly insightful was how someone reacts to unexpected challenges or setbacks. Do they maintain their composure? Are they able to problem solve and adapt? Or do they fall apart, become defensive, or blame others?
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's about resilience and emotional intelligence. How do they handle pressure?
Exactly. It's a powerful indicator of how they'll navigate stress and conflict in general.
So someone who throws a tantrum when their plans get disrupted might not be the most reliable partner in a crisis.
Potentially not. Of course, everyone has their breaking point. But it's the overall pattern that matters. Do they generally take things in stride? Or are they easily flustered and prone to overreacting?
Right. And along those same lines, there were a lot of comments about how someone handles constructive criticism.
Ah, yes, that's a big one. You know, nobody enjoys being criticized, but it's an essential part of growth and learning. Do they listen openly? Are they able to reflect on their actions and consider different perspectives? Or do they immediately dismiss the feedback, become defensive, or try to shift the blame?
I can see how that would be really revealing. It shows how open they are to personal development and self-awareness.
Exactly. And it can be a strong predictor of how they'll handle conflict
Yeah.
and navigate challenging situations in a relationship or workplace.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I'm armed with a whole new set of tools for understanding the people around me.
But remember, these are just tools, not weapons.
What do you mean?
It's tempting to use this knowledge to judge or categorize people, but that's not the goal. The purpose of this deep dive is to cultivate empathy, understanding, and compassion.
I see your point. We shouldn't use these insights to put people in boxes or write them off. It's more about deepening our understanding of human behavior, including our own.
Precisely. The most valuable insights often come from turning that lens inward and examining our own behaviors. You know, what do our actions reveal about our values, our motivations, and our blind spots?
Okay, now you're really making me think.
Good, that's the whole point.
So this deep dive has been quite a journey. Yeah, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. What are some final thoughts for our listener as we wrap up this exploration of subtle behaviors?
I think the most important message is to approach these observations with curiosity and compassion, not judgment. Let's focus on building understanding, empathy, and genuine connections, because ultimately that's what makes life richer and more meaningful.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this segment of our deep dive. We'll see you next time for even more insights and thought-provoking discussions. Wow. Okay, I'm still thinking about all the stuff we've talked about. You know, these subtle behaviors. It's like I'm looking at people in a whole new way.
Right. It's
Yeah.
amazing how much we can learn about someone just by paying attention to these little things they do.
But I gotta admit, I'm a little worried about becoming, like, hypercritical of everyone you know. Like, overanalyzing every little interaction.
Yeah, I hear you. It's important to remember that the goal isn't to become like amateur detectives or something. We're not trying to judge people based on one or two things. It's more about, you know, just developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and others.
So it's about patterns and context, right?
Exactly. Remember how much disagreement there was on that Reddit thread? Like about which behaviors were red flags and which weren't.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It seemed like people had different opinions about everything.
Right, and that just shows how subjective all of this is. What might be a huge deal for one person might not even faze someone else.
That's true. So how do we avoid misjudging someone,
Yeah.
based on our own assumptions and biases?
Well, self-awareness is key. You have to be able to recognize your own biases and
Mm,
be open to different perspectives. And remember, people are complex. We can't just reduce someone to one behavior or interaction.
yeah, that makes sense. It's like we should give people the benefit of doubt,
Yeah.
but also be mindful of those patterns.
Exactly. And remember what that one user said about bad days. Not every negative behavior means someone is a bad person.
Right, like that saying, be kind for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Exactly. We never really know what someone else is going through, so it's always best to err on the side of compassion.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's this. We should observe human behavior with curiosity and compassion, not judgment. Let's focus on understanding empathy and genuine connection, because that's what truly makes life richer and more meaningful.
That's beautiful. I love that. I think we could all use a little more understanding and compassion in our lives. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new about yourself and the people around you. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep exploring.